Hello, everyone. Time for another edition of Off the Hook with MattyD. You know, in the springtime, our trees start to turn green. We start to turn warmer. And, yeah, okay, maybe your allergies bother you. But the thing that I'm going to be talking about today with my guest, Captain Simon Valencia, as always.
What's going on, Matty?
Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Is shad and striper fishing. Now, before we get into anything here, I was scouring your social media to come up with the master at work. Here you are.
Oh, my coaching video.
So-
it gets so consistent
Yeah,
down
so
there.
here you are counting. Tell me about this.
So this is during the spring striped bass and shad, and you can see still no leaves on the trees. This is early. This is probably like late March. Water's about 55 degrees, and we're searching for those herring that move up into the river. There's 4 species of herring that move up into the river. I'll go into depth, and it's such a great way. It's such an easy video to make. Actually, it becomes like clockwork. The entire situation where we fish for them, it becomes methodic. So I decided to make this video to show people, you know, if you follow these steps and you follow this kind of formula,
Right.
you will very often find success. I was on a pretty strong bite this day, and I was like, well, I have to show people what it is that I'm doing so that they can come out and find some success on their own. But it's just, I mean, you can see how methodical it is. You can see me counting on my fingers. You can see, like, and I'll get a little bit into that and how to target them and different techniques, but that's a fun video.
Yeah, no, it really was. I was watching it, and, you know, I mean, I understand the point of count to 10 because you're using a sink tip line. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
So you want it to get down, and, you know, I mean, some parts of the James that you're fishing are relatively deep, and there's a good current in the James, too.
Yeah, that hole right there where I was fishing, you know, it's a 4-foot tidal change beneath the fall line. 4-foot tidal change every 6 hours. So that hole can range anywhere between 10 and 14 feet.
Right.
When we are looking for those fish, hitting them at the point in the column that they are at that day is the thing that, honestly, that's probably the most important thing. And I'm methodical in searching where they are in depth. Usually a depth finder does not give us the right idea because it's like you just see kind of like a cloud of fish down there because there's so many. But you want to get that fly in their line of sight and hopefully trigger them to eat.
And so let's kind of back things up because I wanted to leave with that video because I love the way you taught. That to me was, and it was silent. It was just easy to understand, even in that silent mode. When do shad first start showing up in the James River?
So in the spring, we have. I'm a back up on the shad a little
Sure,
bit actually because I will get to it.
Okay, yeah.
But let me give you a little timeline of what the spring looks like, Matty.
Sure.
So very, very early in the season, we're going to talk specifically about the James.
Yep.
I can talk a little bit about the species overall, but in this, it's more like late winter.
Okay.
Usually about late February, early March, we start to see some of the big cows. If you look at DWR's shocking reports, some of the big cow stripers move in super early. We're talking 50, 60-pound fish, huge striped bass.
Into the James in downtown Richmond?
That's right.
Wow, I didn't know that. Okay.
Yeah, so huge fish. Now, those fish are usually 20-some to 30 years old. There's few and far between, but those are our big spawning fish. Immediately after them, when the water, and that's usually when the water's in the high 40s, low 50s where we start seeing them, which as Reed said, that's also a great time to go fish for a huge largemouth. So
Right.
Not a waste of time to go out that early. Now, if you move on to like mid-March, we start seeing 4 species of river herring, right? This is what's referred to as the shad run. But none of these are actual shad, right? All of these fish are herring. It's common name shad because they kind of look like a shad, but they're big.
Okay.
So that's your American shad, your hickory shad, your blueback herring, and your alewife. These fish move in usually when the water is about 50 to 55 degrees is when we start seeing them with consistency. That tends to be mid-March.
Okay.
And they stick around until they spawn. They come in to spawn. They stick around usually till about late April. So
Okay.
it's a good long
Season.
6 weeks of absolutely incredible fishing. We start through that entire period, the striped bass begin to fill in.
Okay.
Striped bass make their moves on full moons, and there's a little bit more detail to that, but we begin to see good numbers early April, early to mid-April of striped bass, and they overlap with a lot of the herring that are in there. But the striped bass hang out until a little bit later. They hang out till, really till that water is about 80 degrees.
Okay.
And we'll talk a little bit about mortality and conservation of these fish. I mean, some stick around for the whole summer. One was
Interesting.
pulled out last week, you know?
Wow. Wow. Even with that water temperature like 85, 86 degrees. I mean, that James is warm right now because we've been super hot.
It is super hot. I mean, I had a day where I put it in the James and it was 89-degree water.
Wow.
So super hot, but not all the Jameses, not all the depths are the same temperature.
Right, sure.
So some of the holes are 30, 35 feet, and they can go down there and stay a little cooler when the light's down, come up to hunt and go back down.
Gotcha.
So that's a little bit of the timeline of that season, and it really is fishing Christmas, right? I can get really technical about this because that's my job, but for me really is about the excitement of it all,
Right.
and of course you can always come into the shop and ask questions, but for me really is about how good it is. The specifics of it are great and all, and it's a fun challenge, but it is so consistent. There's hundreds and thousands of fish in our system that don't live there, that come
Migrate up and back.
and the distances they migrate are also absolutely astounding, right? The fact that we can kind of intercept them and connect with them in their travels, to me, is fascinating.
Sure.
You know, hickory shad come from Florida and don't migrate much further north than here. American shad migrate sometimes up to Nova Scotia.
Right.
And we just are able to just kind of intercept them here, downtown Richmond. They come back every year.
It's crazy, right? Sure.
Which is super cool to think about the thousands and thousands of miles that these fish move a year, and how long they stick around here, actually. Like, it's actually a good chunk of their year. And then striped bass, right? Like, they spend their summers up in the school that comes into Richmond, spends their summer in, like, southern New England.
Right.
Comes back down into the Chesapeake Bay for the winter, moves up the rivers in the spring, spawns and goes back out, migrates back north for the summer. So it's really a special time of transition in here. It's a special time where we have big, migrating, exciting fish, like right downtown.
Right downtown. I mean, it's so easy. So you mentioned going into the shop here, and of course, I always want to talk about your shop, Current Culture Fly, over on Westover Hills Boulevard. And again, different rods for these fish. The other day we were talking to Reed, and he was talking about sometimes at 6, sometimes 7, sometimes at 8 when he's talking about largemouth or going for snakeheads. What are we using for shad and stripers? Same weight rods, or are we a little varying because shads are slightly smaller in species?
Well, we vary a little bit.
Okay.
We don't vary a lot,
Yep.
right? So for shad in particular, we have to throw sinking lines
Okay.
on the James. Many people have fished for shad like for a long, long time. And they've used lighter rods because the fish are smaller and the flies are small. But that tends to be in smaller rivers. So if they're using 5s and 6 weights in smaller rivers, because they don't have to get quite as deep. In that video, I'm using a full sinking line. to get down 10 feet relatively quick, right? And it's a countdown. You can see I'm deliberately counting on my fingers. Like, you can be in that hole. You can be counting down with a floating line and just not get to where they are.
So just having a weighted fly is not good enough.
Is not enough.
And what about using a floating line, but then putting like a 6 inch per second poly leader? Still not enough sometimes.
Right. Most of the time, not enough.
Yeah.
Most of the time, not enough. Sometimes it's enough, right? Sometimes we're catching them on floating lines, but about 90% of the time we're catching them on sinking lines about 6 to 10 feet down.
Okay.
And a poly leader might get you down there, but as you strip, it's also going to come up a little bit, and that will take you out of the strike zone.
Right.
So,
so you want to increase your chances, stay in the strike zone longer, so the sinking line, the full sinking, keeps you down there even as you're stripping because it's staying level and down there.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that, if you go out there in the spring, you'll see, and this is one of the few situations where I truly believe that the fly rod is more effective than a spin rod, is fishing for shad, and the other one, frankly, it's trout. I can't think of another situation where the fly rod is more efficient than the spin rod. This was this woman's first fish here.
Yeah.
But if you see the fly anglers out in the spring run, very often they're doing better than anyone else.
Right.
For shad in particular, not necessarily for striped bass, but for shad in particular, they're doing higher numbers than anyone else.
Yep.
And that is specifically because they're able to keep that fly line moving in a straight line in the strike zone. With a spin rod, it's going to naturally want to come up. It's going to naturally want to come up as you reel.
Right.
With the sinking line, that fly can stay right in that strike zone for a lot longer, so it crosses more fish, you catch more.
Gotcha.
So to answer your question, long-winded, you're now, we've been having all these guests.
Yeah, for sure.
Now you get to see the nerdy me.
No, that's the greatest part of it because you are the expert in this. And I love the passion that you show and the knowledge that you have is why I call you, when we've talked about this, you're my second host. You are. So this is awesome.
This is so much fun for me, Matty. But yeah, to answer your question, the rod size we use, we never use anything under a 6.
Okay.
And the lines that we can get for a 6 that sink at the right rate don't feel quite as good as the lines that we can use on a 7.
Got it.
So we stick to that 7 for shad, 7 or 8.
Okay.
I mean, all of those rods that are completely bent over, those are 7s and 8s,
Gotcha,
right? Like even the smaller shad, those are hard pulling fish. These are migratory fish that are athletic. I mean, they're not fish that sit around all year. They're not fish that hold on structure. These are migratory fish. They're athletes. So this here is a 7 weight, and it's just,
it is bent really good.
Yeah.
And
take 'em
when
off
you
the
see
motor.
these shad, they're not.
go.
Look, it's a good sized fish. It's a fun fish, but it's not like we'll show in the stripers. I mean, you have some, as I'll call them, cows. They're not as big as the 50s that you mentioned.
Yeah, those are hard.
But yeah, for sure, they are certainly fun. Okay, so we're looking at 7 weight rods.
7 at least.
At least, okay, or 8 sometimes.
We guide mostly with 8s.
Okay.
If you
For
were
more of a backbone, for the easier for the clients to be able to use?
that and versatility.
Okay.
Right? So if we switch from, let's say it's April, and we have 4 species of herring and striped bass and white perch in the river,
You don't know what you're going to get.
well, it's an easy switch of flies rather than carrying,
Rigging up a
4
whole new
more
rod.
rods in
Right.
the boat.
Okay.
So we can get it done usually with an 8. We guide with an 8 a lot.
Okay.
Sometimes I'll bring a 6 if the client is a more advanced angler and I really want them to
Have the
get
fight.
worked,
Right.
get that rod completely folded.
Sure.
But usually the 8 is the sweet spot for us, especially because we're throwing some of these bigger flies for stripers, because they eat.
Yeah.
Striped bass eat.
Eat like crazy.
They are eating machines. So 8 weight rod, full sink line is great. For the big cows, I'm throwing an 11
Wow.
in the like early spring with pretty sizable flies.
Sure. And you do those on the fly.
Yeah.
But the success rate, because there's not as many, you're working hard for maybe 1 or 2 hookups
A
at
season,
best, right?
yeah. I mean, it's we get calls every spring about every winter to go for them, and I'm like, I will take you. I'll happily take you. I know how they hold. I know, but frankly, there might be 100 fish in the whole river that are in there right now that are coming up to spawn real early.
Right.
And we're talking, we're gonna cast through the night, early March, late February.
So
It's
this
gonna
is
be 30
overnight
degrees.
fishing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a different versus. Again, you and I talk all the time, right?
Yeah.
And, you know, especially in spring. You know, I'll see you do your videos on Instagram or your lives, and I'll be like, hey, you know, you're like, you got to get that early, and then you see me on there, you're like, oh, there's the guy who brings me all the rain, and I'm like, yeah, and I'm like, and Simone, you know, I can't get out there at 6 a.m.
I'm busy making rain.
You know, exactly, right? But I do see. I mean, you know, Rocket's landing camera. I've caught you out there.
Oh,
I mean, you are motoring out. 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, rolling down the river, you know, getting set up.
Yeah, so you know when it comes down to shad, right? The herring. I kind of don't like calling them shad
Okay.
because people think of like a little bait fish in a
Right.
in a lake. When we refer to shad, we're referring to saltwater migratory fish, herring. But when we're shad fishing, it doesn't matter how early or late we go. Tides are more important. But for striped bass, they're low light feeders. So our best chances are at sunrise and sunset.
Yeah.
So the way we sell these trips, and I know it's early, right? We meet at about 5 a.m. And motor out, and that first light is phenomenal.
Right.
I mean, as soon as that first, like the duck hunting light, 30 minutes before sunrise, that is great, up until we get sunlight on the water.
And then it just shuts down.
Then it's just really hard. They come pretty shallow when the light is low. That keeps us in the action more often.
Yep.
When the light is above us, they go deep. So not only are we waiting to get these sinking lines to them, we are also having to cover more water in that third depth dimension, right? So it just becomes a lot harder. Can be really good, but it becomes a lot harder to pattern them. In low light, they're in less water, so it's less water to search for. So we do a 5 a.m. and we do a 5 p.m., and we only do half days because that middle of the day,
It's a waste of money for the client.
right, it's not right. So if your best chance is first light, last light, we do a sunrise, sunset.
Is it the same client or is it different clients?
Different clients. We
Okay.
just do have, I mean, I'll take you out 2 times a day.
Sure, right, of course. Right. It's whatever
but
the client wants, right.
If that's what you want. But we don't want to waste
Sitting
time out there
right.
in the day. We have a few people that push for the full days. We try to push them away from that, even though it's
But then I
bad
could go
business
for
practice.
Then I go for the bass slam. I could get my striper in the morning. We go search for smallies or largemouth, right?
Yeah.
So I gotta, if I want to do that, right, and try and do the one day. If I
Absolutely. If that's your goal, then it makes sense.
Right, sure.
Otherwise, it doesn't.
Yeah.
But we run these trips early, and we only run half days, which is really nice for people who, I don't know, have jobs. You know, most people work 9 to 5. Not you and I, but most people.
Right, exactly.
So it's super easy for someone to be like, yeah, I'm going to be at work 45 minutes late.
Right.
You don't have to take a full day off. And we fish 5 to 9.
Right.
And you come into work at 9:45 smelling of fish. Maybe.
Well, there are worse things.
Or you leave work at 4:45 instead of 5 p.m.
Right.
And we fish into the night.
Right.
But
So what time does it, since it gets better, darker, are you fishing until 10, 11 o'clock? Are you ending at 9? Like, you know, me, I mean, look, I go to bed at 9:30, so
No,
I'm missing the boat, aren't I?
you are, yeah. I mean, every time I see you out there, I'm like, it's the middle of the day. It's like 3, 4 p.m. And we've run into each other
Of course.
dozens of times
Right,
out there. I
right.
mean, none of these spots are secret.
No, for sure.
Like everyone from 95 can see where you're fishing.
And especially someone like me, I don't have a boat, and I know you offer all the time, and I appreciate that. But I'm the old wader angler, so I mean, I got to go to certain spots where I can get out into the river a
Yeah.
bit, right? I mean, so I'm limited there. I do on Saturdays or Sundays try to get out there at like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning to get that hour and a half of light, and I'll usually hook up right away, and then it absolutely just shuts
Turns
right
off.
down. Yeah, unless it's a cloudy day. Unless I could bring myself rain.
You should.
Yeah, I should, right?
But you should save it for that day. So the best conditions for striped bass for me have been the beginning of a rain with clear water, right? So if we've gone a couple of weeks, like not this last year was tough.
Right.
The year before, 2023, we had that pretty dry April. And we didn't really get much in the way of a bump until April 29th. At that point, the stripers were in super thick, the river was low, and clear. And we got in the forecast April 29th. I can't forget that day. A rain all day. And it was supposed to start at 4 p.m. And it kind of started at 4:30.
I was off by a half hour.
Yeah, well, you see what you did? Forecasted right all month, and then we're off for a half hour. So I picked up my guests at 5 p.m.
Right.
They tried to cancel on me because it was 55-degree rain. And I'm like, y'all,
You're missing it.
please do not. This
Right.
is going to be nuts. I don't think to the day, and there have been a couple of days that have come close, but these people they were on a 4-hour charter. These people on a 3.5-hour charter called it because they were tired of catching fish. Wow. It was almost every cast.
Right.
Good striped bass. They put over 100 fish, striped bass, on the boat in 3.5 hours.
Wow.
It was every cast. A lot of smaller fish.
Sure.
Some good fish in there. We did see 25s, 26s, like good schooly sized
Yeah, no,
fish
for
that
sure.
pull really hard.
Yeah.
Right? Again, these are not fish that spend their lives behind a log jam or a rock. These are strong, athletic fish.
Especially if they're running up and down the East Coast from New England to us. Yeah.
And in that current,
Yeah.
right? So very exciting, but these people were just like, to the point, Matty, where they had booked the next day as well. And I was like, y'all, don't.
Because you'll never match it.
This
Right.
experience, like,
Savor it.
we can change your date to like a redfish or a smallmouth or something else, but it's not worth it for you to come back again tomorrow because it's not going to be anywhere near this good.
Right.
That being said, we ran about 90 trips in the month of April and May this year. And I think we had 2 days where we didn't catch. And it's so weird that I offered those people a redo. I was like,
Wow,
look,
yeah.
on the house, like,
Yeah.
I almost promised fish those days. and I was like, hey,
We
something's
call it
off.
fishing, not catching, right?
Yeah.
But
it was
you
to the
know
point-
that when it's in, it's in.
yeah, it was like, let's have a redo. Even if it's a middle of the day kind of thing, we can do better than what we did. And pretty much everyone who hopped on the boat caught fish.
Gotcha.
And many dozens. It's such an exciting time.
All right, so we've kind of talked about both species of fish. I want to roll back here to some of your outings. I mean, there have been. So when I started fishing for shad a couple of years ago, I did it on the South Anna, and I caught some nice fish there.
Yeah.
But it's a smaller river.
Yeah.
When I started getting them on the James, there are some much larger fish that run. I mean,
Yeah.
incredible size. Like, I didn't realize that they grow that big.
Yeah, I mean, we have seen 17, 18, 19-inch hickories. This American was, I think it was like 17 and a half inches, this is a rare fish for the James, and a little bit of a interesting and sobering story with these fish, but which we have lost, right? We have pretty much lost American shad on the James River.
Which is why we're not allowed to keep them.
Right. So there is a moratorium on 3 out of the 4 species of herring, which are American shad, blueback herring, and alewife. We are not allowed to keep any. Of course, our whole operation functions on catch and release. You are able to catch and keep hickory shad. They're pretty plentiful in there. But I do want to talk a little bit about the conservation efforts and the reason for that. As far as striped bass goes, you're only allowed to keep 1 a day this year. It changes every year, first of all. This year you were able to keep 1 a day in a slot size. I believe this year was 19 to 24. Again, we didn't keep a single one.
But an average angler that goes out, they need to be aware of those regulations, because if we break those regulations, we're only hurting ourselves and our fishery. We're not keeping it better than 24, 25, because those are reproductive fish at that point, right?
Right, and it shifts every year for those striped bass. For example, right now there's a huge effort to preserve the spawning class of 2015 or 16. Yeah, 2015 or 16 it was, which are now just over that. And those fish are going to become our spawners.
Right.
It was a really strong class, and the numbers have been on the decline all through the East Coast. So we have this really good class that's now becoming a spawning class that's hopefully going to rebuild the stock of these fish, right? That's why they're protecting that size this year. The year before, you could keep one between 20 and 28. Now, most of those fish are on that upper side of that, so they shrunk down how big you can keep those fish.
Right.
Which I think is a phenomenal conservation move. I want to see these fish come back again year after year after year. And here's something really interesting about these fish, right? All the herring and all of these striped bass have a behavior that the people who know what they're talking about call stream fidelity, which means they come back to spawn in the same rivers that they were born in. Which means that if we decimate the stock on the James River,
it's not coming back.
We are going to decimate the James River stock of fish.
Yeah.
You could go to the York, you could go to the Rappahannock.
But now I'm driving an hour, or instead of 5 minutes.
Correct. Right. And that's what happened with American shad.
Okay.
Right? There is a really traditional Virginia dish, shad roe. American shad used to be the most prevalent migratory fish. In the spring, they made up most of the biomass of the James River. Okay. It was a ton of fish. And through the industrial era, that has dropped off to the point where we rarely see them. I didn't see one this year.
Didn't see any American?
No wow. Americans. The year before I saw 3. The year before I saw 1. So this picture here, this picture of this fish, is a pretty special picture to me.
Right.
It's not that these fish are rare, but they're rare in this water.
Right. Got it.
And they used to be
so plentiful.
Plentiful. But this is what people picked out to make roe. So if you get one of these fish and you kill it and cut it open, you're not just killing that fish, you're killing
the potential reproduction of that fish in the
5,000 eggs.
Yep, right. Yeah.
And that's why we don't have many of them anymore. So we really should be conscious of hey, is this a male or a female fish? Favor keeping a male if you're going to keep fish.
Sure.
Of course, not American shad.
No,
do not
sure,
keep
right.
the ones that. But when it comes down to hickory shad and striped bass, fish that you can keep, try to keep a male fish. There are conservation practices that you can take on outside of what's legal.
Right.
That helps
the sustainability of the species.
Of the fishery, so that we can continue to have them, so that our kids and grandkids and great-grandkids continue to have them. This picture makes me really happy.
What I love about this is it just shows how early in springtime that we're catching these fish. Like you said, I mean, the herring, the shad come in late winter, and here we are. I mean, those are the early season trees popping. That's the first thing I noticed, being the weather guy that I am.
Yeah.
You're noticing the father-son team, or whatever this might be, and you have memories. Because that's the one thing I love about you, is you remember every client you have in some way, because there's a story behind everything, and that's pretty amazing. So why is this a good picture for you?
So these people are legends of the James River. I've learned a lot from this guy. He's been the guy holding the fish, Steve. He's basically the shad run legend. He's a phenomenal shad angler. He built the first boat in this style to fish for shad in the James River, and now there's 3 that you see, 3 little funky pontoon boats with motors that don't go very fast, but they get them to the holes, and it's just this amazing platform to fish for them. Shad Steve has been fishing for shad since I first moved to Richmond. I've seen him, I mean, since before that, I've seen him every year for the last, 12. That guy is out there breakfast. He eats fishing for shad, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. If he's not catching fish, there's no fish to be caught. So this guy knows what he's doing.
Right.
And he's also this is what I love about the shad run. He wants to see everyone else catch them.
Right.
You go up to this guy, he's the nicest dude on earth. Hey man, how did you put all those fish on the boat? Oh, this is the fly, this is the leader, this is the rod, this is the line. I'm looking for this at these tides. He will give you all the information he has. And I think this is a special situation too, because there's so many fish that we can all get a piece of the pie, right? This is why a lot of anglers aren't secretive about the shad run. Well, also that's 95, so everyone's seeing you fish, and there's the skyline, so they're seeing you fish. So I think it's just this very specific. Most people, when they have a good fishing spot, keep it to themselves.
Right.
This is different.
Yeah.
This is, we're fishing downtown, around 60 other boats.
Yep.
And there's hundreds of thousands of fish. We're just gonna get along, and
We're gonna have fun.
we're gonna
And we're gonna cheer each other on, right? For sure.
it's awesome.
It is for sure. You know me, teaching kids to fish. Every time I find a picture that you have of a child fishing, I love every minute of it. I mean, the
it's so
smile
much
on
fun.
the dad's face, the smile on the kid's face. It's fantastic. Jumping out of water. What are they called? The tarpon of the James River, right?
Or poor man's tarpon, or James River tarpon.
Right.
They fight like tarpon.
Yeah.
They pull pretty good. They're not big.
Sure. Right. Exactly.
But they jump and tail walk, and very exciting fish, very visual fight.
Yep.
The strike is not very visual, but the fight is. And the numbers.
Right. That's it. That's the thing. I mean, a lot of times, when you're out with your clients or even your friends, I mean, you're putting 50, 60, 70 fish to hand in an afternoon like it's nothing. Because like you said, this is the one fish that you can pretty much, it's shad season, I'm going to guarantee you're going to get into fish.
Right. I mean, it's rare when we don't.
Right.
I will make my bets against it.
So don't invite me out because we're going to be blanked.
We're going out. We're going out. So here's some cool data about all of these herring. They don't eat on their spawning runs.
Interesting.
They might opportunistically feed, but most of what we're doing is we're triggering their instincts. There's a couple of different theories, right? We're triggering their feeding instinct when they're not feeding by presenting something small enough, close enough, right? A non-feeding fish can be converted. But the more popular opinion is that these fish are laying eggs at the bottom.
And they're striking out of aggression, kind of a thing?
They're striking out of aggression. So what we're throwing is some smaller flies that sink quickly. And they eat as in between your strips when that fly is sinking. Got it. Which that one makes a lot of sense to me. That one makes a lot of sense to me because they're not actively feeding. When they dissect these during the spawn run, their bellies are close to empty.
Gotcha.
So they're not actively feeding. Is the theory is we are kind of ticking them off, and they're striking out of aggression for protection or instinct.
And so I understand that. As you know, I fish up north on the Salmon River and the Great Lake tributaries, and to get the kings, you are basically they're sitting there, and you are presenting a fly over and over in front of their face until they just strike out of aggression, right?
Right.
So I completely get that.
The difference is that you're trying to take off one fish up there,
Right.
And here you're trying to
Chicken.
take off thousands, so one of them's gonna get it.
Right.
It's a lot easier down here, right? It's
For
like
sure.
what you're describing is actually a pretty hard technique, but
It is.
there's so many here that one of them is gonna get ticked.
Right. For sure.
One of them is gonna go after it. So it smaller, colorful, bright flies that really catch their eye and make them go crazy.
And we call them shad darts for people who don't know.
Right, shad darts, which, if you're out there fishing with a spin rod, you could just use like a crappie jig, like a little inch and a half twisty tail grub with a jig head, and that does really well.
Right.
Honestly, anything bright and about inch and a half, bright, just most obnoxious thing you can find.
Without giving it away, I mean, I've done it on fluorescent, chartreuse, and stupid hot pink.
Yeah, and or shiny.
Yeah.
Right, like spoons work really well with spin. Anything that just you see and it's like that is obnoxious. That's what you want to throw for these guys.
Right. In fact, let me see if I go back here, because the one that was tail jumping, go back there. You could see the bright fly.
Very bright fly.
Yeah.
Of course, when the water clarity changes, we also change our approach a little bit. Those bright flies require clarity and light to reflect that light so that the fish can see them. If it's gray and the water's got a stain to it, we kind of just want to give them that shadow with a little bit of bright. So I switch over to like a black and pink, black chartreuse, something with a little more contrast than saturation.
Gotcha. Going through the last of the shad pictures here, just fantastic. Okay, so you're fishing for shad, and it's April, and all of a sudden now we are starting to get into stripers. And this is, look,
So
again,
good.
this is, you call it catching, I still call it fishing. It is fun nonetheless. Great schoolie sizes here. Great fight, give you an awesome time. You're thinking 8-weight rods here?
Yeah, 8-weight again for the size of the fly and the size of the line. And frankly, anything under a 7 is really not enough to get these fish in effectively, especially as the season goes on.
Because we're heating up the water, and we don't want to tire the fish out and really hurt them in that respect.
Correct. We just want to give them a piercing. It's, give them a piercing and send them back to disappoint their mothers, which is what these fish did.
Right. This is a heck of a fish.
Yeah,
Look at the belly on that guy.
So that's an early season fish.
You can see by the trees in the background. Yep.
Yeah, that's an early striper fish, striper season fish. Probably like early April.
Okay.
These people booked a shad day. Clouds rolled in right after that first full moon in April, and I was like, "You guys want a striper?" And they're like, "Yeah, we've caught plenty of shad." And Victoria here, she is an incredible angler. I think she was 15 at the time of this picture. Incredible angler. It took her 6 minutes from the time we decided to chase down a striper to hook this like 25-inch fat
It's fat.
female
Yeah.
pre-spawn that fought her really hard.
Right.
We had 7 weights, and this is what I mean. We had to chase. Thankfully, the water temperature was great, so that fish recovered beautifully.
right.
But we had to chase this fish down because we were undergun because we
Undergun.
were shad fishing.
Yep.
But this fish was awesome. I love this picture because of the story. She's just on point. Here's old Reed
It's
with
a
a
big fish,
big, really nice fish.
Yeah.
This is one of the biggest ones we've pulled on the fly so far. This was a mid-April fish, and we just went out one morning, cloudy. We were like, oh, let's get out early, get that first light, and then we look up and it's like, it's gonna be a really good day. It's gonna be cloudy all day.
And those are the days you look for, especially if you don't have anything booked and you're just fishing with your buddies. I mean, yeah, for sure.
We on those good days where it's cloudy, I'll stay out after a trip and call somebody. This is usually when I call you. Hey, Matty, are you working? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, of course. What am I not?
We should go. Like I'm fishing after I'm done guiding. Let's go. That's
You know what?
when I
From
get my
now on,
fishing
I'm not saying I'm calling in sick.
Yeah.
I have the 9 o'clock flu.
You're on air, man. Can't say. Don't say that on air.
Can't say that. Little kids out there catching fish as well. Beautiful fish.
So that one.
You wanna go back? Yep.
Yeah, let's go back for a second because I do want to make note. This is in the fall.
Okay.
And this is at the mouth of the bay. This is in the Chesapeake Bay. We do run striped bass trips all fall, most of winter, and then of course the spring.
Now there is a season in which you're not allowed to go after stripers anymore.
Trophy.
Right? Trophy. Okay.
Right. Trophy season is out now most of the year.
Okay.
There's a very short trophy season. You can catch stripers.
You have to release it immediately.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
But catch and release stripers are on the table. It's not like you can't target them.
Okay.
But you can't keep them. And there's no trophy, and it discourages a lot of anglers, which actually makes those fish a little more willing to participate very often.
For sure, because there's not the pressure anymore.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
So in the fall, I love this kid. This kid's great, Davey. This kid's awesome. He caught an inshore slam. That's sunrise right there. What you're seeing is sunrise.
All right. So hold on. An inshore slam. Let's tell people what that is.
Red drum, speckled trout, and striped bass. So that's the Chesapeake inshore slam. This kid caught it in an hour. It was like speckled trout, and then we pulled onto this flat, and we saw like wakes rolling. I was like, "That's in front." Immediate redfish, nothing big. I think that fish was 20 inches.
Who cares? It's awesome.
And then I was like, "Hey, we got good current here, Davey. Those stripers are here." It was like October. Puts top water right on the bank.
Popped it.
And that fish, as soon as that fly landed, exploded on that big, nice big striper.
Wow.
This was a phenomenal day.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
this kid had the time. You can see his teeth, just peeled out. He had a phenomenal day that day. And when they have a good day, I have a good day, right?
Of course, because I mean that's what it's about. You always talked about you want your clients to succeed. You want your friends to succeed for sure. Just another gorgeous striper. I mean, I could sit here all day. This is a large fish too.
Yeah.
I mean,
He let. She had never fly fished till she encountered the shop.
Oh wow!
And she has become a stellar. And when I say stellar, I mean absolute beast of an angler. She has become really, really good. She's living in Michigan and chasing smallmouth and pike and trout, and she's doing phenomenal. But she came down this spring to come fish with me, and that's her dog, old Ford, and we got them on the boat, and they just cleaned house.
That's just awesome.
And that's a very nice, hefty fish. Put deep bend into that 8-weight, peeled drag, like very exciting fish.
That's awesome. Actually, let me see if I can find it here. I think we have some sound of. We'll skip you here. I should go backward. I think we have. Oh, that's a release. He's fighting. I thought we had peel drag on this one.
He probably does.
Yeah, I thought we had it, but nonetheless, I mean, just fighting it. I mean, and that is a great bend and run.
That's
happy.
a 9-weight. Yeah, buddy.
Yeah.
That's on a 9-weight.
So you're talking about decent sized fish.
Yeah. So usually early season, they like to eat bigger stuff.
Yeah.
Right.
So we're throwing like 6 to 7 inch deceivers because, I mean, think about it, right? You have fish that migrate that eat everything, right? Striped bass eat everything you want them to. they migrate north to south, south to north, freshwater, saltwater, brackish water. So they're adaptable.
Mm-hmm.
If it moves and it fits in their mouth, and they have huge mouths.
I mean, in some of these pictures here, you're talking a mouth that's as big as my fist.
Right. Huge mouths. If it fits in their mouth, they're gonna eat it. So what do striped bass eat throughout the year? Well, in New England, they're eating pogies and bait fish, and they're eating mouthfuls of like sardine, like
Right.
minnows.
We used to call them killies and stuff.
Achilles.
Yeah, right.
They come down. They're eating menhaden. They're eating if there's any shrimp left, they'll eat it. If they find up north, they're eating crabs through the summer. Then they're eating eels, lots of bait fish when they're here in the winter. That's the forage that's available is going to be bait fish.
Mm-hmm.
Then they come up the river. I seen one eat a duckling.
Wow. Oh, because they come up and they'll smack the small duckling.
Right, it's spawning season
yeah.
for ducks as well.
Right.
And those ducklings are small. And you see one, if you see them in a little train,
Mm-hmm.
right, they're probably safe. But I saw one lost, and we just were like, oh, that's not good. Kept an eye on it. Next thing we know,
weight comes up, and that's the end of that story.
that's it. That's the end of that. But they eat leeches, they eat eels, they eat crawfish, they eat bait fish, they eat hellgrammites, they eat frogs, they eat, like, you name it, and they're going to eat it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, early in the spring, most activity in the river is bait fish. But when these fish come in and the water's really cold, some of those bass are still very sleepy. Some of the chubs, some of the sucker fish are going to be still pretty sleepy.
Right.
Those fish are big,
yeah.
right? Like, we're talking about sizable fish. So we're feeding them big stuff to catch their eye. And those fish are sleepy, so stripers are mostly foraging more than chasing at that time.
Okay.
So we feed them larger stuff. As the season goes on, things move faster and they become more willing to chase because they have to, especially just after the shad leave, because they're also eating shad. So 4 years ago, we pulled a 22, right?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty standard fish, 22, that spat out a 9-inch largemouth, right? 22-inch fish spat out a 9-inch largemouth, and then it ate a 6-inch fly.
Oh my gosh.
They're hungry hippos. They eat. They really do eat. Oh, that's a great fish. Keegan guided chairs to this one.
It's unbelievable.
Downtown. This was not super early, but some of those big fish hang around through April, right?
And then run out to the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah. And then we're left with smaller and smaller fish with better numbers, right? Because they are more willing to feed.
Right.
And then once we get into late May or early June, the water temperature, once it hits 80, they just don't recover very well.
Right.
So we leave them alone. There's still some in there.
But at that point, you're now going to the Chesapeake Bay. You're going for your drum. You're going for your redfish. You're now working speckled trout. And your seasons are evolving at that point.
Right. Yeah. It's not that we couldn't guide for them into late May or early June. There's still enough fish in there for us to do that. But from a conservation practice, and like, we have the beautiful issue that we handle so many fish so often that we just kind of want to be conscious. The mortality rate of striped bass on catch and release goes up at about 70 degrees exponentially.
Wow. Okay.
That's pretty much the entire month of May. We are quick with those pictures.
Yeah, for sure.
We are very quick to release in May. April, those fish, They're good. Under 72 is like the cutoff where it
line.
just really begins to spike exponentially. Thankfully, most of our spring is under that.
Gotcha.
But we pulled the plug at about 79, 80 degrees. We really pulled the plug. At about 72, we changed the way we behave.
Gotcha. Right.
With those fish. It's like, well, if you don't need to take a picture with this fish,
Then we're going to let it
then
go
we're just going to keep it in the water the whole time. And I know there's a lot of pictures of fish here.
Yeah, for sure.
But there were a lot more fish caught, right?
Yeah,
This is
right.
how I like to release them.
Yep, right water side, pop the hook out and
Yeah.
let them go. Right.
Yeah.
Yep. Gotcha.
That's how I like to release them, just keeping them in the water, keeping them healthy. I see a lot of Instagram posts, right? This is such a popular event, and very often I find practices of catch and release practices from people who I know really want to care,
Right.
but don't have all of the information because, frankly, we've been we as in humans have been really bad at catch and releasing for the last
Eons.
yeah. And frankly, we just didn't have the science. But anytime I see a fish pulled up by the gills, for example,
It's dead.
it's dead.
Right.
Any fish that is handled with dry hands is removing their
The
protective
slime.
film, and that's a fish that's going to get sick and probably not make it.
Right.
Any fish that's out of the water for longer than 10 seconds is a fish that's probably not going to survive. Lipping a fish and holding it like this with smaller fish is not a big deal, but if you get a bigger fish and you're just lipping and I'm holding him up like this, these fish are designed to be in low gravity,
Yep.
horizontal.
Yep.
All
Not-
of their guts are going to get pulled down and it's just going to do them harm. So one of the things that I really press for these fish, because A, it is so plentiful out there that we're handling a lot of fish, but so we need to
Keep them.
keep it in mind and handle them properly. So looking up the best catch and release practices is crucial, I think, for the longevity of these fish, because these are spawning fish we have here. These are not just, you're not handling one
They're not
fish.
resident fish, right? Yeah.
You're not handling one fish. You're handling a spawning class
Gotcha.
every time. So I really like the work that Keep Fish Wet does, or Release Over 20. And if you're familiar with those nonprofit organizations, if you aren't, check out. They have really good information on how to properly handle catch and release fish.
Gotcha. Going to bring up your website as always and your shop. To Simone, we could go on for hours, and we have gone on for about 45 minutes, so we will wrap this up. Simone, of course, Valencia, the co-owner of Current Culture Fly Shop. Book him for Chesapeake Bay. Book him for herring, stripers, trout, even though he doesn't say he likes trout. He does like trout.
I do.
Just about everything out there. He can get you in touch with people if you want to do pike or muskie or everything. Just at the shop, 804-322-7555. And, of course, you can scan that QR code. It'll take you right to the website where you can learn more about Current Culture, more about Simone, more about Reed, and all the stuff at the shop.
Thanks so much, Matty. Yeah, really excited for spring already. I know it's just like not even fall, but I'm already looking forward to it. It really is like fishing Christmas, and it's cool to see all of you, all of the people who come out. And I see you more in the spring than any other
Right,
time.
for sure. Well, now that we're doing this, you see me more and more.
I'm excited about it, Matty.
Simone, thank you so much once again. And everyone, we appreciate you joining us for another episode of Off the Hook with MattyD. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Off the Hook with MattyD.